Hi, we are Jeff and Kathy Teichert with Love in Later Years, and this is our Sunday Spirit Candy series.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. And we want to talk about a really important subject today, which I'll let Kathy introduce.
So, we're going to be talking about spiritual freedom for just a few minutes. It's a subject that came up in my 365 wonderful spiritual thoughts from President Nelson, and he quotes the scripture from Galatians 5:1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. And he goes on to speak that freedom is a mental and spiritual force, the power to survive ordeals. It's spiritual liberty, and that by self-surrendering to a greater power, we get this freedom.
I have always admired Anwar Sadat, who many of you know was president of Egypt, the second president of the modern Egypt after the overthrow of the monarchy. And when he was fighting as part of the revolutionaries, prior to that, he would go around and give these very passionate speeches with raised fist, and he would say, I will never shake the hand of an Israeli as long as they occupy 1 inch of Arab soil. And he would pump his fist, and people in the crowd would say, never, and he would say, never, and they would shout, never back. And he was militantly anti-Israel and very much wanted Israel to fail and to be gone. And when he first became president of Israel, Egypt, he even had a war with Israel. But prior to that, he was jailed. And in his jail cell, he had a chance to think deeply about a lot of things. And he talks about how he achieved greater liberation within that jail cell than he had ever had before, because he was no longer a victim of his hatred, of his anger at Israel.
Which he realized he had created.
He realized that that was a shift that he had to make if he wanted to be truly free. And he said, I achieved greater liberation in that cell. And as you may or may not know, after a brief war with Israel where his own brother had been killed, if you watch the movie about him, you can see Sadat weeping at his brother's tomb and saying, I will do whatever I have to do to stop the killing. And he gave a speech where he announced, I will even go to Jerusalem to stop this madness. And he did. He became the first Arab leader to go and visit Jerusalem and meet with the prime minister and the Knesset. And of course, as it turns out, he and the prime minister of Egypt ended up coming here to the United States and negotiating a treaty of peace that has lasted more than 40 years.
That's an amazing story, and such a stark contrast from where he was to where he ended up. And we believe that we each have these things in our own lives, these journeys, these pilgrimages that we make in a mental and spiritual capacity to shift not only our own lives, but all that we influence. And, I wanted to mention that in his next entry on the majesty of creation, that it's hard for us to imagine how he created us and this world. But he said, I would like you to stretch your minds to think of things beyond what is easy to grasp. And Jeff and I would just like to remind everyone, if you haven't already heard of our LilyPod podcast, we've had over 1,100 listens in just the last few months that we've been doing it. And episode 11 is called Our FSIBO Model. And it's all about how to separate out your thoughts, your stories that you're creating around the facts of your life, and be able to intentionally elevate your emotions, your energy, and ultimately your behaviors and your outcome. And as Jeff's story so eloquently indicated really the influence you have for everyone in your life.
Right. I mean, in Anwar Sadat's case, his internal peace that he gained by becoming free of his negative emotions translated into peace for two nations.
Wow, that's amazing. And think about how much change we can do in our own world, in our own lives. It's a lot, and it's such an important endeavor to do thought work. So remember to listen to LilyPod episode 11, Our F-SIBO Model, and we'll put a link in the comments. Thanks so much for listening to our Sunday Spirit Candy. We are Jeff and Kathy Teichert with Love in Later Years.
And remember that any time is a good time for more love in your life. We'll talk to you next time.